and it was a kind of real thing. Anyway, I just think that you're at a moment where what you've done, you'll sort of emerge out of it, and increasingly I wonder how it would become projected, or would you cease to accept perspective and the indexicality of time in cinema?
I think what's intriguing about the project is it's one of those things that one goes by in the room, in the thesis room, and one says, yet another narrative project. And then you turn that on its head and you turn it to something else. And I think that's a very, very incredible sort of strength. To be able to, through other tools, to make something which looks like something become something. And I think extremely artistic. Because to be able to sort of show something that everybody thinks that they know everything about it, but then through the discovery of the method or the process of description, but also sort of presentation, but in a way, description, presentation, but the narrative that you create. You make it to have another space and another perceptual form. That's one thing that I think is extremely exciting, but also extremely strong. The other thing that I think is very strong is the fact that it uses video, it uses film, all the references are there. But I think it's probably, for me at least, the closest architectural project that I've seen that gets to something like the whole of or the whole work of Holocaust. So I think that if an architectural project can delay the element of borrowing, but allow to steal from something else, which is a totally different domain, but be able to make similar statements. I think you know.
So, Kulas has always said all we have is the city, right? And this really is an illustration of that. The thing that might be missing, I was hoping that maybe you were going to use this to show how you might operate on the city slightly differently because of the construction of this narrative. So to many, this might be a form of exploration, of investigation, of resurrecting, of excavating various ideas of the city, so that your operation would be different than if you just looked at what it was now. And so it could have been just the tiniest of things that you might have done in the city to show what has been learned by this. Yeah, how about, if you had the opportunity to redesign one of these places, maybe even using friends' glasses, how would this story change it? How would it make you? Maybe daylight something.
You kind of allowed me to bring up something I was hesitant to bring up, but in the first zone 1 and 2, the Contemporary City book, Village video mapped out, like, it was kind of 10-page analysis of a crime scene, faux analysis of a faux crime scene. But the reason I bring it up is, 15 years later, 20 years later, they're doing Lincoln Center and Juilliard's campus, and the degree to which there's a kind of evidentiary analysis that precedes reinvention. To me, I couldn't help but think of Village video and this early Village video. But the degree, that question all we have is the city. That there's something about the way Liz and Rick go from art installations that are kind of metacritical of something urbanistically and surveillance, predation, capture, release, to playing it out at the full scale with the Billionaires Club of Lincoln Center, et cetera. But there's
Putting
another
them on display.
Yeah, that puts them on, them. Well, they are now on display.
Right, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah, that, you're exactly, so I do think that that's an incredibly amazing career and important thing going on there, but what's often not said about that work is that there's this other side of village video which is so intense about structure and material and kind of autonomy and tautology and icon and figure and quoting of history. It'll be very interesting to see, you know, how these things that you start to invent fold out of the script and become projective rather than analytic.
How
I
it
mean,
becomes operative.
Yeah, I mean, it's, people always say it was so ironic that Village Video would become such power players in major projects, but if you look back at it, it was kind of obvious that this kind of inquisition of the city would yield that capacity, at least it seems. Yeah.
I have a question. Let me see if I understand, if I can. You're really looking through a glass back to history, right?
Yeah.
Back to the 67 period, specifically. Deconstructing it and then trying to project it, creating new spatial and visual perceptions somehow onto the present. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, I got it right so far. The question is, the history is site-specific in many instances. It happens at the Hilton, it happens at the post office. Now, your subsequent projection happens, you didn't really mention it, but it seems to me, if it is exchange-graph, in a place which is completely detached from what happened back in 1967. And therefore, the relevance of this projection and this recreation of fragments of history relating to the present central, I don't find that linked. Or if you tell me that's not important, maybe I can accept it, but I don't find that linked. And I don't find the link from basically that to these drawings. So I don't know whether...
I haven't shown it with you guys.
Good question.
I actually started doing that at the other bridges, which are linking the more like maze-like parts of Central. And that actually I took all Jesus. I took all the pedestrian bridges and I project the Hilton Hotel on another bridge, which is also connected to the one that I interviewed.
I think it links to very tough central kind of question we're all asking, whether the way we refer to the city or we project back to the city with a certain much more kind of comprehensive dimensions, or still we only choose to perceive the city through looking glass. It's a really tough question beyond your thesis. And for example, I would argue that if you really confine, the whole thing is all about kind of visual perception and 2D representation, it becomes very isolated problem. So it becomes coded language that the only insider can really understand, can enjoy, right? And it's not so much about memory, it's about 2D representation of memory fragments, right? For those who can only understand the history, can choose to comprehend this, can have fun, right? I would argue that the other kind of history can be considered, let's say, not only to learn from the Cubist discourse, but also to learn the history of translating Cubist into the city, let's say collage city, right? The Colin Rose idea of collage city to kind of consider the city not as a 2D collage, but like the collage of typology, urban fabric, artifact. Then I would say Stan's suggestion, right? You look at the physical 3D examples, Suzhou Garden, right? To project the pictorial composition, all this technique back to environmental making, you not only make the linear kind of pictorial affect, but all this construct this comprehensive reference between people and then history, memory, landscape, etc. Right? So it's really suggestive to see whether we can still make one step forward. Right? We have much more advanced representational technology today, So not only about perspective, distortion, perception, can we try hard to project all this intelligence forward, either to urban environment or to deeper understanding of urban history? Something, I'm very stubborn, something still relate to the 3D kind of dimensional urban environment, something, either history or the future. Something.
I just want to make maybe a comment that we can bring into the afternoon, but I think it's quite a provocative project, and I think that maybe what you've stumbled onto here is a new way of rethinking the problem of the diagram, which tends to be something that is drawn in graphic. I mean, Shumi was working with this pretty intensively, but you're able to bundle together, as is being said, histories, mishistories, abuses of history. But if you see this almost as a tool to diagram out a set of possible scenarios that you can then project from, like your model here at the end, if this tool generated that geometry in Central and gives you that as a kind of actual intervention in Central, it becomes a very different way of operating as an architect. You kind of start as an editor working through scenes and perspectival space, layering in histories, and then you're able to output from that a possible project. And I think that's a very different idea about diagramming that uses contemporary technology and addresses a number of critical issues that have been brought up about diagramming in the discourse.
Mike, do you want to respond to maybe the last three comments very quickly? Or you can choose. You can respond to whichever three.
Sounds responding to one who's.
You want to finish?
Yeah, so like Rocco was asking why when I studied history, but that part of Hilton Hotel is nothing to do with the last intervention, which is of the exchange grid. Yeah, actually, that part of exchange grid, there's also the post office components, which is also part of the United States. And yeah, I've been showing that there. It's the bridge where they bring the mail down to the sea, and that's where.
But that's the old
Yeah,
part of the stuff that we use.
it's the
Anyway, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Okay.
Mike, I want to see if Mike would give us a little more material by asking the following question. How would you characterize the project as you have presented it today in terms of what we would do next? This is so clearly a kind of report on a method of investigation. And so I think it's reasonable to say where is this now? You know, what is the state? What is the condition of this project at this moment? And I'm not talking about what it's going to be in 10 years, but like, what's the next step? What would you do next? What do you foresee?
I actually started from see the video game as a tool, and I start to use that to see the city and discover more things. And I think the next step is to further push that mirror thing that I actually started to design, but it's actually not really, it's just a pavilion now, but it could be more, it could be pushed forward to tell even, I mean, to further the technique. Yeah. That's what I think I can work on.
Continue with the project.
You will continue.
I, just as a sort of conclusion to the morning long panel, there's been a lot of references of history and memory in the American context. I just want to quickly bring one in the context of Akbar Abba's book, The Culture of Disappearance, where he examines through different methods of the portrayal and the design of the city, through architecture, film, literature, photography, and really is a critique on what has happened in Hong Kong in the past century of the erasure of memory, the erasure of identity, the erasure of architecture to a certain extent. And for me, you know, the morning panels, the morning projects, ending on lights, you know, it's really the students looking at with the tools that they've been giving as an architect, how can they really, not necessarily react against it, but how can they intervene and be part of kind of perhaps redirecting where the discussion of sort of the culture of Hong Kong in relationship to how architecture, space, film, photography, in this case, video game being a newer, perhaps, maybe Akbar would consider adding a chapter in his book, adding on these sort of virtual spaces that now is a prevalent mode of representation of architecture in the city. So in some regards, a lot of the points that's been raised in this morning will continue in the afternoon. So I would encourage everyone to please come back after a very short lunch break. We are supposed to start the afternoon panel at 2:30. We will start at 2:45. So very short lunch break, and see you guys. And thanks to Mike and everyone who presented this morning.
No,